And it's the 11th of July 2013, and we're sitting with Peter Hall and Brian Ringrose and myself, Andrea, and we're going to talk about Brian's work as a longshoreman today.
Sounds good.
Yes.
So, Brian, thanks very much for seeing us. Maybe we could start with asking you about your first day of work on the waterfront. When was that? And tell us about that first day.
Okay, well, I started longshoring in 1963. I think it was in December. I had unfortunately quit school a little early. Didn't finish, so I had but one option. My dad told me, you're not going to sit around here, so send you to work. So I went to the Longshore Hall. You just get told, it's busy. You never may have a chance to get a job. You had to get registered in those days to become a longshoreman. So I went down, and that day they were busy, and I got registered, and I got a job on a Russian freighter at Searles Elevator at Fraser Surrey Dock. And we were down below. They poured the grain in loosely, and we had to make a floor with bags. We loaded jute bags with grain and made a floor so the grain wouldn't shift while at sea. So that was my first day. Actually, a very good job. It got a little worse after that, but that was a good job the first day.
Why was that a good job?
Because it wasn't that hard work. Just, scooping grain into a bag wasn't that heavy. And the bags, we didn't fill them that heavy. So it wasn't that hard to work. It was dusty, but it was a good job relative to a lot of jobs that I would do later.
Right. And so when you say you just describe this business of making the floor so that it's safe at sea. Did they then pour the grain on top of it?
No,
after
that
you
would
made
be they'd estimate how much grain they needed. The supercargo would say, okay, we need another 20, 50 ton or whatever. They would pour that, and then because they couldn't fill the ship full, and grain's just like water, it would shift at sea. Mm-hmm. So they put this floor of maybe, I think we went 6 or 7 high, maybe 5, 6 feet of bags right across on top of the loose grain, so that would stabilize it, so it wouldn't shift at sea. I don't think they do that anymore. Most ships you can fill right to the top, so they don't do that. But
there's no problem of the grain shifting.
But when you only fill a ship, say 3/4 full or half full, it's just like water down there. If it shifts, you put a lot of list on the ship and make it very unstable.
Right. Okay, so you described that as one of the best jobs that you had. What were some of the not so fun jobs that you had?
Oh, we had very heavy lumber, doing that by hand. Fletchers, which were sometimes 6 inch thick, 14 inches wide, 20 some odd feet long. Flooring them off wasn't bad. You'd make a floor just like you'd floor level up, keep going up till you fill the hatch. But when you had to wing them up, which means come out of the wings to fill the wings up, you had to lift them up, 6, 7 feet, and they were heavy, very heavy. Mm-hmm. That was one. Just sack jobs, period, were a lot of work. Heavy sacks. Doing that all day in a hot day, that was tough work. Bags of flour, bags of fertilizer, did a lot of that. A lot of dangerous cargo, like not dangerous from to say that it was dangerous, but you would slip out of the loads, a lot of sliding lumber coming at you, slings would break. Those were the dangers, but the heavy work was a lot of the bags. We had this one other job called Nickel Matty. It actually came from trail. It was molded, not trail, going to trail, excuse me, but it was molded wherever they made it, somewhere in Asia, and they broke it up, just big chunks like rocks. They put it in the deep tanks of ships, at least not always, but in the few times I did it, deep tanks, which are just a small hole where they used to fill water for ballast in the ships. And you're in maybe a hole that's 10 feet wide by 20 feet long, something like that, and full of these, call them rocks. Mm-hmm. And pick them up, you put them into a skiff, a metal skiff, and take them out of the hatch. But your fingers were just destroyed in that job, and very heavy. Mm-hmm. Some you just had to roll in because they were so heavy.
Right. And when you first went to work there, did you get any equipment or like gloves or safety stuff or anything like that?
Nothing, not a thing. The only one you got something on was log jobs. You got the cork boots, strap on to your own boots. That's the only thing I can remember when I started that you got from the employer.
So what tell us about cork boots.
Well, that was another job. That was on like logs, loose logs, where you're loading them out of the water. And in those days, they weren't bundled. Today they're bundled. You put, depending on the size of logs, 6, 8 logs in a bundle. They're strapped together and very easy to load that way. But when I did it, they were all loose. So it was a lot harder to stand on them. You couldn't stand on lots because they were too small. You had to jump from one to one, and you used the cork boots to stabilize yourself so you didn't slip off the logs.
Describe a cork boot for somebody who's never seen one.
Well, today you can buy them as a boot. And they're like, if you've seen spikes on the bottom of a golf shoe,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're like. Something like that, okay? So that you have something to dig into the bark or the tree you're standing on,
Mm-hmm.
the log you're standing on.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, you just had these strap-ons. You had your own, if you had work boots. Some of us didn't have work boots, had whatever you're wearing, and you'd strap these onto under your shoe, and that would be your way to keep you from falling in the water as much.
Okay. When
They still wear them today because even on the rafts, you need them today on the logs too.
Yeah. So the logs that you were loading then, they were loose in the water?
Yes, yeah. Come in a boom, but loose.
Uh-huh,
Just
uh-huh.
Every log was single. We'd sometimes, whatever we could get in a sling load, 3 or 4 logs, whatever we could wrap up and pick them up with the slings, and away we go.
Right. When did the employers start to provide equipment and
Well, it was
clothing
not-
and that kind of stuff?
Not during my time. Like I did a lot of office work. I was a union rep for about 26 years.
Mhm.
So up until 76, when I started going into the office as an officer, they didn't supply much up until those days, really, that I can recall. We'd started as, a union to push the employer for, we'd get May West, the flotation, we'd get them, but nothing other than that. And then we started pushing them for certain things. Like now they get a boot allowance.
Mhm.
They'll supply, safety vests, other types of equipment for the guys nowadays. But it was a struggle just to get certain things off the employer in those days. And to face it, a lot of us didn't want it anyway.
Why do you think that was?
Well, you're dealing with a bunch of hardworking men that didn't want a hard hat, didn't want safety boots, didn't want anything. Just let me go to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
very hardcore people.
So when you first started working, you quit school early.
Yes.
So how old were you? And tell us a little bit about how it was to work
I was
in
18.
in the
I started a
groups.
little later than a lot of guys. A lot of guys started younger.
Uh-huh.
They're 16, 15 years old. I started at 18, and I was pretty nervous, pretty green. My dad told me, he says, you go down there and you do 3 things. Keep your head up, your mouth shut, and your ears open.
Good advice.
And that was good advice because you're dealing with some guys that, they were good men, but they weren't going to listen to any kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're going to tell you how to do it. And I learned a lot from working with the guys. When you work in a gang or group of people, you learn a lot about the job and about the union.
Uh-huh. So was your father a longshoreman?
Yeah, my dad.
And where did he work?
He worked in the same place. We moved out here to Delta in 1951, and he was working in Vancouver at the time at a mill on Marine Drive, and then he got a job just down here by Fraser, Surrey, at a plywood mill called Mount Baker. And then a few years later, he met people, and one of them was a longshoreman and told him, you make a lot more money on the waterfront. So my dad went down and started working towards the mid-50s, I guess he started. And then my brother started longshoring about 1961, I think it was, or 62, and then I started in 63.
And when you tell us about the first gang that you were part of.
Well, you didn't really get into a gang when you first started because they had their group of people, already there. I would be just called like a spare. If they were short a guy booked off, or he didn't show up that day or they needed men, that's how you sort of got a job. Because the gang process was in there. Like we at times would have 40 gangs of men, and a lot of them were in a gang for, that was their job. They would get phoned at home and say, you're gang 4, you're going to PCT 1D at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And that's how they would go to work. And then
So the gangs wouldn't even go to the hall?
not a lot. No, they could get phoned. Yep, yep. But fill-ins or extras, spares, things like that were dispatched out of the hall. And if the gangs were only full for a period of time, and then guys started getting out of the gang system, they didn't like it as much. They wanted the freedom of doing a different variety of jobs out of the Longshore Hall. So the gang system slowly evaporated, you might as well say, to where there was nobody in gangs at a certain point probably in the 70s. But I actually joined a gang in the I guess it would be in the early 70s. I joined a gang. We were the top side, the guys that drove the winches. I did that for quite a few years.
What was it like to join the gang, or what was the process of joining?
If you had the seniority and nobody else wanted it, you put your
okay.
name in. There'd be openings and you just apply for it. It's like a posting.
Okay.
Just any normal posting. You post for it.
And did you join a gang that was already sort of established? They had been working together for...
No, at that time there was hardly anybody in gangs. But
okay.
me and my partner, we decided, let's try a gang out for a while. We just wanted to see what it was like, so we joined a gang, and we worked in the gang for quite a while. We had us two, and we had 2 slingmen. Those are the guys on the dock that would sling the loads up. They were the gang, and that was basically our gang. The rest was usually just fill-ins from the hall.
And when you say your partner, who was this guy?
I had a guy called Doug. Doug was my partner for quite a few years. Good man. Unfortunately, he drank too much at a young age. But you got to know guys in those days really good. A lot of the people you'd work with, you became friends with. You socialized with. And then when you got away from the gang structure, or when I became a union officer, you kind of grew away from them. Some would go to West Shore, the coal terminal, and you just didn't see them as much. The gang structure kept you together, where nowadays you don't have a gang structure. And I found that the gang structure was a good learning process, especially when I was young. You were told then what to expect. You didn't need a foreman, basically, in those days, because the guys were your boss, in a sense.
Self-regulating.
They were very self-regulating. If you didn't pull your weight, you heard about it, or you got the hell out of you were sent. I never did, but I've seen them just virtually tell a guy, "You're not cutting it, buddy. Get out of here." I wasn't a foreman, and they were gone. And if they didn't, do it the next day, or they might be in a different gang, eventually they would leave the waterfront. It's hard to explain without, you know what I mean, but they were virtually pushed out in a sense, because if you can't do the job, you're not staying down here, buddy.
I guess there's not much room as well to wait for guys who can't do it, or there's not
You're doing a
much
lot of hard
wiggle
work.
room, right?
If you didn't pull your share, the other guys weren't going to do it for you.
And mistakes can be costly, I guess.
Oh yeah, but I mean, a lot of it was you're just not physically capable, but there was some that just didn't want, slackers, just didn't want to do it. So if you don't want to do it, don't hang around here, find another job. So we had a lot of people leave the waterfront, a lot. I would have no idea, but we registered so many hundreds of people, and they would come back years later, and sometimes their work number would still be active, and they would start again. But now you can't do that. Once your number is deregistered, you're virtually gone.
Right.
But in those days, it was allowed to maybe come back 3 years. You hadn't worked in 3 years. Your number was still active. You came back and tried it again.
So the very first day that you went down, you got a number?
Yes, I didn't have a number before.
So after the first day you worked, you got a number?
First, you couldn't go to work until you got the number. What would happen, the dispatcher would say, he would get all the people that had numbers or, wanted to go to work that day, and he'd say, okay, anybody out there want to go to work now that doesn't have a number? And you charge up there. That first day there must have been 10 or 15 of us charge up there, eh? Because my dad told me, as soon as you hear that, get up
You're
there.
waiting, yeah.
Because your number is going to be your seniority. So
You want to be ahead of the other 10
exactly.
guys, I guess, that are there that
exactly.
day.
You want to be the first, so it's almost like a war. You charge them.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a little registration book,
Yeah.
a little piece of paper about that big, 3 inches by 2 inches. You signed it, and there was a number on there. My number was 24150. That was my number for years, and then they changed it for some reason. They changed over to a new number system.
Yeah.
Then I got number 02777. So it's quite interesting how it. But your number was that kept your seniority as long as you were down there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no mistakes in office, because in those days you didn't have computers. It was all by hand, and
Yeah.
a lot of guys would argue that their seniority was wrong. And I actually had to clean up a mess one time over nepotism. That was another story that gave me a lot of gray hair
Yeah.
when I was their union rep.
Do you think it? I mean, did it help you that your dad and brother were in the industry?
Only to get me to tell me to go to work. That's all.
Yeah.
Other than that, no.
Yeah.
No help that way.
Mm-hmm.
Just said, get out of bed and go to work, because you're not laying around here.
Right.
So that's the only help that helped me.
Yeah.
Other than that, nothing.
Where were you? Where were you living at the time?
We were in Delta, just
North Delta.
yeah, same house my brother lives in today.
Okay.
Corner 88 and 116.
Okay.
I know exactly where that is. It's right by my house.
There's an old house there it's a massive jungle of trees right on the corner.
Oh, yeah.
Right on the corner.
Yeah.
That's my old house.
Oh, you're kidding. And your brother still lives there?
Yeah.
Okay, I know the
when
one.
when we bought that, there was nothing there but bush. It was 5 acres when they bought it.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 acres. And then 116, they expropriated my mom and dad's land. And 116 went right down not quite the middle, but down the middle of our my mom and dad's property.
Oh, okay.
Got $1 for it.
Oh, God.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Delta expropriated it for the road. But that's where we lived, and so we'd travel into New West to go to work.
Right.
It seems like a lot of guys where their dads kind of told them to go on to the
Oh, yeah.
waterfront. And did dads, or did your dad feel like being a longshoreman was a good way to work and a good way to
Well, I guess
earn
he
a living? Or
because he knew the job, and the money, like, we got pretty good money compared to, we made more money than, like I said, he worked in a mill, got more money than mill workers at the time.
Uh-huh.
And there was a lot of work around in those days. You could go to into the forest and work, or mills, or construction. So there was lots around, but it was probably one of the higher paying jobs at the time. So.
Right.
And he knew it was hard work, but he said, if you can cut it, it's a good job.
Mm-hmm.
He had worked there for quite a few years before I went there. So, but yeah, a lot of family connections on the waterfront.
Sure.
Still is today,
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
even though the government has told us, nepotism is no good. And from my point of view, they're the most nepotistic people you could
Yeah.
see. But it's okay for them, but not okay for us.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's not nepotism if they're driving to work and they say, okay, we'll take you with us. That's not nepotism.
I never thought it was nepotism to tell somebody to go to work.
Yeah.
If you somehow rigged it so you brought them to work and went ahead of other guys, then it's, I guess, nepotism. I don't know.
But today, casuals carpool because they have to,
Oh yeah.
and of course that's more likely to be relatives and people who know each other
Yeah.
who carpool together. I mean, but that's.
I'll
not
tell you, at the time, the employer liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually wanted to get his kids. A lot of employers want, and they did get their own sons. They would. They'd ask you, "You busy down there?" I said, "Yeah, okay, I'm sending my kid down." Oh, he might get a job.
Yeah.
Why not? But they liked the family aspect, because a lot of cases, I know my dad as an instance, he didn't want me being a screw up.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing from an employer's point of view.
Sure.
He knows if your old man's on the waterfront and he brings his kid down, 9 times out of 10, that kid's going to be a good worker.
Yeah.
He's not going to screw it up because the old man's right there to let him know too.
Right.
I heard the other day you weren't working so good. What's going on here?
Yeah.
So
Keep
worked
an
pretty
eye on
good.
you.
Yeah. When did you become a member?
1971.
Okay.
So would that have been 8 years between?
Well, it was
you
about
started
7 because I started late in '63. It was
Okay.
about just over. It was about just a little over 7 years.
And was that long or short at the time?
It
or
was
it average? Or?
Fairly average in that time frame.
Mhm.
My dad actually became a member in less than a year,
Wow.
I think it took my brother, who was ahead of me, about 5 years. So it just varied. It varied on the amount of people.
And we're picking up where we left off. We were just asking Brian to talk about the different places on the river where and around Vancouver where he did different had different work sites.
Okay, when I started, we had work at Fraser Mills. We had small ships that would go through the bridge and the rail bridge down to Fraser Mills. I think one of them was called the Ron Deegan, and there was one called the Besiegan. Quite small ships, but went down there and loaded lumber. The mill workers would bring the lumber to the ship. They weren't longshoremen, they were mill workers. And then our guys would sling it up, and we would load the lumber down at Fraser Mills. We worked all of PCT, PCT and overseas, all that area. Then the car docks, Annis's Auto Terminals, which is now called Wallenius, and Fraser Wharves. And there was also a berth down there at near just the other side of the tunnel, which was called the rice mills. And we used to get vessels come in there with loads of rice and sometimes even some pineapple. We unloaded pineapple down there, remember? And then, of course, Fraser Surrey, when it came on stream. Well, that's actually where I worked my first job, at the elevator, Searles Elevator. And periodically, if Vancouver was busy, we would travel over there and work over there. That's where that's all I did.
Right.
But some guys did go to the island occasionally, Vancouver Island.
Right.
Worked over there, and actually guys did travel to the States back in the 60s and worked down there. But that's basically what we worked on the river, or those areas.
And can you tell us something about the people you worked with? What languages, what backgrounds were they from?
Well, they had lots of different nationalities were on there. A lot of hard men, a lot of tough guys. A lot of guys were veterans from the Korean War or the Second World War, and so some pretty tough men, and certain things would agitate him. I recall a time when I was going to work and was going to go up the gangplank and was told, or the guy said, where the hell are you going? And I said, to work. And he said, no, you're not. And the problem was they weren't flying the Canadian flag, but they were flying the rising sun, the Japanese flag. So when you're a war vet and you see that, they weren't too happy. So
On the ship?
the ship was flying those flags,
Yeah.
yes. Yep. So they didn't have the Canadian flag up, which they're supposed to.
Oh, they're
'Cause
supposed to
you're in
when they
Canadian-
dock?
When you get into Canadian waters, you're supposed to fly that flag.
Oh.
So we had a half-hour break or whatever till they got the proper flags up. But that's just, guys had been, there was 2 or 3 guys down there that had been captured in Hong Kong. I remember talking to those guys about it. So they had a lot of, unfortunately, animosity. Well, not unfortunately, but that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
So pretty tough people you were dealing with, but a lot of good guys. Once you got to know them, very good people. A lot of French people. A lot of guys come from Millardville, but all different nationalities were down there.
Okay. And the French guys from Millardville, were they mill workers who were coming across?
I guess a lot of them could have been, yeah. A lot of them heard that there was a lot of work on the waterfront, and like I said, they knew it was good pay, so they would come down. But just about guys from every nationality that I could think of, were down there.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it have been common to talk about guys' backgrounds and especially like experiences with war and that kind of thing? Was it common to get into that over
Some
the
guys
course
would.
of a few days? Or?
Some guys would, especially if you might go for a beer with them or something. Sometimes a lot of guys wouldn't talk about it, but a lot of guys would. Yeah. Or they would talk about others that they had heard about them being in the war. I recall one guy, he had got his leg really badly damaged in the Korean War, and he still was able to do his job. He was still doing the tough work, loose lumber bags and everything. But good experience to meet a lot of them different people. It's quite an eye opener for me, and a lot of characters. A lot of characters on the waterfront. Curly Smith was a guy that, when I saw him, he would probably be in his 60s when I first saw him, or maybe late 50s. And he's wearing an old sports jacket, some kind of slacks, dress shoes with no socks. And that's how he went to work. And this guy was as tough and strong as anybody on the waterfront. But he was a heavy drinker, eh?
Yeah.
And the one day I'm sitting in the hall, and you're just sitting around waiting for a job, and he came in and he was talking to somebody and reached in his pocket and he pulled out a box of baking soda and he had a spoon stuck in it. That was his antacid.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm not kidding you. Oh yeah, Curly Smith. Oh, we had a lot of characters. Yeah.
Okay. When you did you spend a lot of time sitting in the hall
Oh yeah,
waiting?
yeah, you did. Yeah, yeah. You virtually would. I didn't have a car at the time. If my dad was going to work, I'd get a ride in with him because he got dispatched a lot. He wasn't in a gang. He didn't like gangs too much, so he'd go in just about every day to go to work in the morning. So I'd ride in with him usually before I had a car and sit around. Didn't get a job. Sometimes you'd play cards, waiting. You'd wait till noon because a lot of times guys would book off at noon, and you might get a half a day. And if you didn't, you might wait around again until the afternoon dispatch. So sometimes you could spend your whole day there, just waiting for a job and not get one.
Right.
You spend a lot of time.
And if you got an afternoon dispatch, then you were at work by 3.
No, we started at 5 till in the afternoons in those days went to 11 or 11:30.
Okay.
Afternoon shift. When I started, there was only 2 shifts, the day and the afternoon, and I think we quit at half day Saturday. My memory, and no Sunday. We didn't have the 724 when I started.
Right.
It came quite a few years later, like it is today. So, but yeah, a lot of time waiting. Even when I got married, we lived in an apartment just below, near the museum actually, in New West, where the old hospital was, and many times we sweated about making our rent because you go down there, you might get a half a day in a week.
Mhm.
It's just the way it was.
When did you get married?
69.
69.
So I wasn't a member yet. I didn't make membership till 71, I think it was 71. So there were some pretty lean years, you know. One week you might get 5-6 days, next week no work, no nothing, you know. So
In 1969, was it an option for you to go to West Shore?
West Shore didn't open until I think it was 71, 72.
Okay.
I think I could have went there, but I didn't choose to.
And-
Some guys with less seniority, I know 1 or 2 guys with less seniority than me, because it wasn't a popular place. When it opened, people didn't know, and also the employer, the BCMEA, threatened those guys to, if they went there, they weren't going to be allowed to work on the waterfront here. There's a lot of dissension from the BC because they were a separate contract.
Uh-huh.
So they weren't too happy when that opened down there under a separate agreement.
Right.
So a lot of guys chose not to go down there. I just didn't like the idea of going down there. I wasn't worried about it or anything. I just didn't want to go down there.
You didn't want to drive all that way?
I just didn't like the sound of the job. I liked the job up here was so much variety. I mean, down there you're going to do one thing, load coal.
Yeah.
That's it. So didn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
No. I did 1 shift down there in my whole career. I was a bad boy once, and I got a 3-day suspension. So the dispatcher phoned me up. I was at home, and he says, I got a job down at West Shore for 3 days. Do you want it? No. Okay. So I went down there. I put in 1 day, and I phoned him back, and I said, Norm, that's pure punishment. I do not like that job at all. If you can get another guy, get another guy. I'll do my 2 other days off at home. You know.
What had you been suspended for?
I got into an argument with the foreman,
Oh.
and it's a real silly story. Yeah, we were loading bags, and we were doing a good job. We weren't fooling around or anything, but you land a load, and then you carry the bags into the wing, which you can't see from the up above. You're looking down, you can just see the hatch. You can't see inside the wings.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in there, and we'd just taken the last, there's 1 sack left on the pallet board. And we're just talking about moving our landing space you got to move to make room to put another load in. So we're just talking about where we should go. And he starts yelling, what the hell are you guys doing? Anyway, I come out and said, just give it a second. We're deciding where to move here. He says, pick that bloody bag up and drop it and they're giving you another load. So I picked it up, dropped it on my feet. I told you the stupid story. So I said to him, okay, now, well, I kind of swore, what do you want me to do? And he says, you're fired. So the whole gang quit. That was it. We all went. So the gang didn't get anything, but I got a 3-day suspension for it.
The gang quit with you in solidarity over the...
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you did in those days. Guys were tight. Yeah. Lost a night's pay, but
Yeah.
that's what you do to prove a point, I guess.
It was important to stick together if there was a...
Yeah. I mean, the guy was being a jerk.
Yeah.
And we knew he was drinking. I mean, I caught him drinking 2 days later. Or not 2 days, two jobs later when I was working. I just walked in, opened the door. What are you doing? He knew what I was. I didn't do anything to him. I didn't charge him or nothing. But he got the picture.
Where did that happen? Was that in the hall or...
Out on the ship.
Where, on the ship?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did that happen often, that guys would sort of take off into a corner or something and have a drink, or?
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't know whether you want to leave that on, put that on tape or not, but alcohol was a big problem on the waterfront. Lots of drinking. And from the top down.
Why do you think that was?
Just an opportunity. Just was there. You know. You could find it on a ship, you could buy it on a ship, or you could bring it on the ship. So.
Could you buy it from the crew, like the sailors would be selling it, or?
Oh yeah. A lot of crap, but it was there. Yeah.
So what these were guys from other countries, and so they had something exotic.
Yep.
Was that the idea?
No, they could make some money off of it. Let's face it, if they might have a case of liquor, you know, in their cabin. And the customs in those days weren't around very much. So they would, whatever they paid for it, they could probably double their money. But we could buy it way cheaper than we could buy it at a liquor store.
Oh. Do you think they lifted it, like the cases that they have?
They may have
lifted it from their ship, or?
They could have, possibly. I don't know. They may have. You never know.
Was alcohol really expensive in BC in those days?
No.
No. It's just it's just strange to me that it would have been so much cheaper on the ship.
Well, they didn't have to. Wherever they say they brought it from Japan or where they didn't pay any duty or anything on it. Follow? So
yeah,
it would be whatever. Say a bottle would be $3 in the liquor store. We could get it for maybe $1. So you see, it was better to buy it off of them if you could.
Even if guys weren't drinking on the job, would they sometimes just buy their liquor down there and like take it home, put it in their liquor cabinet for?
Not usually.
No.
No.
It was the guys that were.
It was usually consumed.
Drink, yeah.
No,
immediate
too much.
consumption.
Not too much would go home, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No.
Did anyone ever drink so much that it became like there had to be discipline on that?
Oh
that
yeah,
guy,
for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Actually, it was a big problem, and when I got to be a union official in '76, we started to find out then that we were having a lot of problems, and a few years later, we worked hard as a union and as union officials to get a handle on it. Because it was just ruining families, dangerous, and a whole gambit of things were involved in it. So we worked very hard to clean it up, and I thought at the time we were pretty successful in doing a lot of that. But we self-discipline in our local. We did a lot of self-discipline. We have a grievance procedure where if I have a problem or I get charged by a union official or a union brother, I go to the grievance, and the grievance will deem a penalty. We do that still today. But the employer also will discipline us. But we tried to keep it away from the employer because, for a couple of reasons. I mean, once you get in trouble with your employer, eventually you may lose your job. Whereas if we can discipline you, we can give you time off and still keep your job. And we work even with the employer. We said, look, we know so-and-so has done wrong. We're giving them a 2-week suspension or whatever. And they said, okay, that's good. We understand. And away we go. So it worked well. I think it's still working today on the waterfront for us. We were fortunate we could do it that way. We did help a lot of people. So it took a lot of time though, because you're dealing with. When I first started, I mean, you'd go out there, you'd be petrified sometimes. I mean, you're talking to some pretty rough people, and they got an issue, and you, the business agent, better solve their issue. So wasn't easy.
So tell us about the different offices that you held.
I was a business agent 18 years, I guess it was
Wow.
somewhere like that. And then I was a president for about 6 or 7 years. I'm not good on dates and times, that roughly. I did it for 26 years anyway.
And business agent was the first office that you took working
Yeah.
administratively, sort of?
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you enjoy that? Like,
I loved
what
it.
made you go for it, right?
I was actually
When you started?
talked into it by a couple of guys. They said, you always seem to know what you're talking about. You got a little bit of a big mouth. Why don't you get your butt in there and see if you can... Because we'd heard the current business agent was a real good guy. He'd had enough, and I think he was going to West Shore at the time. So there was actually 2 openings. The other guy wasn't going to run either. So there was 2 openings. We weren't bumping guys up. We weren't trying to... But so it was kind of wide open for anybody to run. So I put my name in, and lo and behold, got elected.
What was the running process like? Like when you would stand for election, was there any campaigning among the membership?
No, we
or
didn't.
just-
We didn't campaign.
You just sort of put your name out and people would know you? And...
Yeah. Today, like other locals do campaigning, we actually frowned on it. We didn't want you coming in front of the membership and saying, "I'm Joe Smith. I'm going to run for office and do all these magical things for you." We never did that, and I never liked that thought process myself. I thought if you knew me, knew what I was like before I got elected, but then
Yeah.
after I was elected, you knew what I did. You could see what I did. If you thought I did a good job, well, there's my name. Do what you want to do, eh? So
Why do you think 502 is different in that way?
I don't know. It just evolved that way, Peter. I have no idea. I just really don't know. I've never seen it. They may have politicked behind, in beer parlors or whatever. That's their business. I never did.
Yeah.
I never had a reason to, or never wanted to. So I did it for 4 years. Then I was almost at a burnout stage. Took a year off, missed it, and then went back and stayed until 2001. Then I tied up ships from 2001 until I retired. But I enjoyed it. I like business agent better than president, actually. Because you're out on the job.
Yeah.
President, you're in an office.
Mhm.
Business agent, I was out on the ships more and checking gear and checking the job, and things like that. So.
And Joe had told us that it was easy if you took an administrative job to get sort of consumed by it, or it was easy to have your whole day taken up, maybe 24 hours by the
Oh, yes.
work that you did, and that a
Yes.
lot of people burned out eventually and
yes,
had to
yeah.
step
Yeah.
aside from it for a bit. And did
Yeah.
you experience that? Did you get
Well,
quite tied up in
I
the work
did,
that you
like I said, I did it for 4 years, and then I needed a break.
Mhm.
I took that year off, just went back working on
and
working on the dock, and but I did miss it. So then I went back and I stayed for the remainder, right up in, well, that would be somewhere where 80, took 81 off or whatever, then went back until 2001.
And what does a business agent do? Can you describe the
Well,
type of
in the
work?
day, I don't know what he does today, quite frankly. I think they don't do quite the same job as I did, but we had a lot of ships in those days that the gear was no good,
Oh, yeah.
poor shape, safety-wise. So part of your job, you'd get a call. Okay, we're at such and such berth. We think the gear's no good. I'd come down and check it. Then the guy from the transport would come out and we'd confer, and yes, we'd agree. We'd go up to the captain's office and sign off that this is the repairs that had to be done, and before the guys would go back to work. That was part of it. Just checking the jobs, making sure guys were doing the job safely, or they were being told how to do it safely.
Mhm.
A lot of grievances, guys got in trouble. If I had to deal with the employer, things like that. Sort out a lot of problems, whether they were between guys, having disputes of their own on the job before it got out of hand.
Mhm.
And it was consuming. I'd get home, and when I was on afternoons, right after lunchtime, I'd tell the wife, phone's going to ring, or my pager would go off. It's just about like clockwork. They'd go for lunch and start talking, maybe tipping, who knows, and then the crap hit the fan.
Yeah.
But
So were you on call as a business agent for each of the shifts for a day? Like if you
we
worked
worked
in the morning and...
we worked a funny schedule back then. There was 2 of us. I can't remember our days off, but we'd work like 6 days, which would be early morning till 5 or 6 at night, and then have a couple of days off, and then go on afternoons back and forth. They were quite long shifts.
Mhm.
I mean, you had your time off, but you were always married to that phone or pager. We carried a pager. You know,
Right,
so.
right.
But I enjoyed it, or I wouldn't have done it. You know. But it was tough dealing with some of the guys early on because they were testing you. You're a young kid. That's what you could be 40 years old. They still call you a young kid.
Mhm.
You know, you go out there and they'd want to see what you got. Okay, we got a problem with this employer. You solve it. And that's what you were supposed to do.
Mhm.
So I did it for that many years, and I guess I did enough that they kept
Yeah.
collecting me. Maybe there was nobody else
You were
silly enough to
usually
do
able
it.
to solve the problem,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah, I didn't do too bad, I guess. Yeah.
You were elected elections every year?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And how about conflicts between guys? Like, what kinds of things would come up where you had to be a sort of conflict resolution person?
They may have a problem at dispatch where it usually would be some silly thing that they just didn't like each other, or maybe there's something on the job they didn't think a guy was doing his share, or who knows what.
Mhm.
But a lot of things would come up like that, and you'd have to go and solve it. Or sometimes it was even silly things like hygiene.
Yeah?
Yes, oh yes.
Some
Good.
guy smells bad and
You got it.
guy who's working next to him doesn't appreciate it?
Yep. Oh yeah, I had a lot of that actually. It was a very, very difficult one to do. You know.
Sensitive, yeah.
Yeah, I got called on one that they said, you got to get over here. It's killing us. And I said, okay, I'm coming. You know, like they were at Fraser Surrey Dock, so 20 minutes away, coming from New West, and get over there. And honest to God, I kid you not, I walked on the ship. They were in number 4 hatch, which was the hatch nearest the quarters. I didn't get to within 10 feet of the hatch. I knew what they were talking about. It was that bad. I'm not kidding you.
Oh no.
So I had to tell the guy, get the hell out of here. Go clean up.
Hit the showers.
Hit the showers, buddy. You're out of here. You're relieved. And I'm not kidding you.
my
It was
God.
that bad. I stuck my
Wow.
head over the hatch and I said, holy Jesus Christ. Terrible.
So you knew where the guys were coming from in that
Oh
case
yes,
then.
they were definitely a good call on that one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been down in the hatch if I was down there. I would have got the hell out of there.
Yeah, it must be close quarters. I never thought
Oh, yeah.
of that. Like
And-
working with
And you're working a lot,
grown
you know.
men and
In a hatch can be very
heavy
hot.
lifting and yeah.
If you're in a hatch with the sun's, you know, this kind of weather we've been having lately, and the
Yeah.
sun's pounding down on you, and you're working, say, sacks or something, it
Yeah.
can be pretty hot and hard, and could get a little rancid, all right.
Yeah.
Just silly things like that would happen,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's a lot to do with the ship's gear in those days
Mm.
to deal with that, or manning. Like you get to a job where they thought they needed extra men, and so you had to go out and try and persuade the employer to hire extra men because it was it was required, whether it was an extra signalman to signal the hatch tender or something like that. So a lot of jobs that were similar to that too.
By 2000, once the containers were fully in place and so on, were you still having issues with gear?
Not that much, no, but we still have steel ships coming to Fraser Surrey Dock as an example, where
Uh-huh.
I think today they're in a lot better shape. We don't have the same problems, but you still have periodically where part of the ship is worn out, whether it be a shackle, the blocks, something could be damaged, the wires are frayed. That happens periodically now, I think, too, but we had a lot of it in those days.
Right.
I mean, ships, when I started, I mean, you could walk on the deck of a ship and literally see down below on some deck because they were rusted out.
Mm.
You know, so a lot of these old, the Liberty ships used during the war,
Mm-hmm.
our friend Donassus would buy them up some graveyard in Europe. You'd see all these ships, and you'd put one on call. And I guess in those days, if you could, they said, this is what I always used to hear, if you could make one round trip with that ship, you made some money. You know, bring something over, load it up, get it back, and before it's, and hopefully it didn't sink. But literally, some of them ships were in really bad shape. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. Just terrible.
Yeah.
Seen one where we were on lumber, and a lot of times the lumber would be long and it had to be dipped to put in the hatch, because the hatch is only, say, 20 feet long and your lumber's 25 feet long. Well, you got to dip your loads.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you dip them in and they'd start whipping around a little bit. And anyway, this load hit the side of the ship, inside, and went right through. That's how weak some of these these ships were. Can you imagine being a sailor on some of them?
Oh, scary.
Scary, yeah, very scary.
Did you talk much to the sailors?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, got some stories about
Oh yeah,
sailors.
we got to know them in certain cases. My brother knew a lot of guys. Used to write to each other and whatnot. But I got to know some guys, and if they were steady callers, they'd come in. You know, you'd see them, and maybe a month or two later, they might come in again. And you'd say hello. You might take them out for a drink. I don't think I ever brought any home. I would have got shot probably if I did. But
Bringing
my brother,
a sailor up from the waterfront
Yeah.
would have been frowned upon.
maybe in this house. But my brother used to have parties with guys at his place.
Uh-huh.
Quite often, you know, bring them up. He knew got to know a lot of sailors.
Where were some of the regular callers from?
Could be anywhere, Peter. You know,
Yeah.
we had a lot of Filipino. I got to know some guys from Norway. Norwegian guys were actually bringing in cars at the time, and we were on his ship one time, and it was close to lunch. I heard a whistle, looked up, and there he was, sending down a nice cold 12-pack of beer and some sandwiches. So just stuff like that
That's
happened.
not bad.
So stuff like that would happen, eh? But you'd take them up to the bar and have a beer with them if they were, if they had time off, and maybe you finished work and they were off call on their jobs. You could take them out.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys got to know the crew real good. I don't know if anybody told you the story about one of our guys buying the dog,
No.
getting the dog for.
Let's hear the story about the dog.
Well, this guy was a very nice gentleman, and he'd heard this guy had lost his dog on the ship, because a lot of dogs would be on dogs, chickens,
Oh, wow.
crazy animals on ships. Anyway, he thought the guy had lost his dog or whatever, so he went to the pound and either bought or got him a dog. Eh? So the guy seen him coming down the dock and said, "Where are you going?" He says, "Well, I'm taking it up to the ship." He said, "Do you know what you're doing, Howard?" He says, "Well, yeah, the guy lost his dog." And he says, "That dog's not going to live long, buddy. That dog's supper."
Oh God. Oh no.
Oh yes.
Did the dog eventually?
I don't
go
know what
off
he
to
did with the
ship?
dog.
You
I don't know
about the
if he
fate of
took
the
him aboard or what he did, but I mean, a
dog?
lot
Oh,
of
my.
nationalities they eat. I mean, I've seen dog hanging in meat stores in Asia before. So,
Oh my.
but yeah, I've gone down below on ships and seen where they've stored their fighting hens. Yeah, they would have
Wow.
fighting hens.
Like cockfights
Yeah.
and stuff on
Well,
the
I didn't
ship?
see them ever have fights, but they had them on the ship.
Oh wow.
You'd go down below and some of theirs, pretty tough smelling. Because a lot of them had dogs, and I've seen them have the fighting chickens. Yeah. So cruise quarters were pretty rough in some of those
Yeah.
ships. Very, very poor living conditions for them guys.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you find it interesting to just chat with them and
Oh,
find
yeah.
out about their lives and where
Oh,
they
yeah.
came from and that kind of thing? It
Yeah,
must have been a
was good.
good, nice part of the job.
Yeah, if they, when they spoke good English, was good. I mean, sailors had a tough life. They still do, but I mean, in those days it was a lot tougher because they had a lot of different work to do. Now your ships are in such good condition. They did a lot of painting, repairing the gear on the ships, and they were working nonstop on tough work.
Mm-hmm.
Where today it's not quite the same. They go to shipyards for most of their repairs. Where those days they did a lot on board themselves. Yeah.
Did you find you had a lot in common with those guys? You could kind of
Oh,
level
yeah.
with them on a lot of stuff in terms of work.
Oh yeah,
and-
for sure. I mean, they were lots of family people. I mean, they all missed their families, and
Yeah.
very tough living conditions for them guys in those days. But, it was interesting because a lot of times you could be on a ship for up to over 2 weeks.
Oh right, yeah.
If you got called back, sometimes they'd call our gangs back, and you'd be on that same ship for 3 weeks, 2 weeks, loading lumber right from the bottom right to the deck. So you got to know the guys pretty good.
Did they like that? They liked to keep the same gang working the ship?
Yeah, a lot. If we were busy, it was continuity, and
Yeah.
and then they didn't have to redispatch. It was good for the Union Hall didn't have to redispatch. No, so, yeah, you get called back a lot.
So would they be able to tell you for the next 3 weeks you're going to be doing this job?
No,
and then
no, you'd basically you didn't know, but you'd just be told at the end of the night you're back tomorrow
Back
morning.
tomorrow. Oh, okay.
You know, you're back tomorrow. So
Yeah.
you never knew. You couldn't forecast it any longer than that, basically, because you never knew what was going to go on. But that's how they would tell you.
Those must have been good runs of time
They
there.
were.
If you had like a 3-week period where you were on the
Yep.
same ship,
That was
steady money coming in.
steady money. It was nice. It was good.
Yeah.
It was good times.
How did you in your at home? How did you? Because you said there were some times when you didn't know how you were going to pay the rent. How did you deal with this? Some days, sometimes you'd have 3 weeks every day, and some days, sometimes you didn't know if you were going to get a job. How did you and your wife deal with that?
Well, I don't know how to explain it. We just knew that we couldn't spend a lot of money because you never knew where it was coming from. So we saved whatever we could and just hoped that the next week would be better. And it always was. I never went broke, never had to go knocking on somebody's door, but it was tight times, it was tight. We can recall when we laugh about it today, our big payday deal sometimes, we'd buy a big old round steak. And we cooked the hell out of it because we didn't know how to cook those days too good. And that was our big splurge for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Just silly things like that, but you remember them, eh?
Yeah,
Because money was tight, it was tough to make a living at the start. It still is pretty tough for new longshoremen.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's very tough to, no guarantee in this job.
Yeah.
Well, there is, I guess, if you work, say, a regular workforce job, but when you're starting as a casual, you never know. Like I got days when I got 4 hours. Weeks, 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next week you might get 4 days. You might get 32 hours. So up and down like a yo-yo.
Yeah.
You just never knew. Never knew.
Did your wife work at all?
No. She babysat. She made some money. Not when we were first married, but later on when we moved over here, she did a lot of babysitting.
Oh yeah.
But no, I got hell for that over the years because I kind of liked her to stay home. Her full-time job was looking after the kids, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. So, different philosophy than is today, but I still get razzed about that a little bit.
Would she have did she want to go out to get a little job or
She
something like that?
probably would have if you really.
Part-time or something like that?
Yeah, she probably would have.
Yeah.
She still bugs me to this day. Well, I don't have a CPP. So.
How many
things like-
kids do you have,
I
Brian?
have 3.
3?
Yeah. One of
And-
them's on the waterfront.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when were they born?
Oh, now you're testing me. My oldest was born in 60, and, 70, and the other was 73 and 75, I think it is.
Boys, girls?
2 girls, 1 boy.
Okay.
Girl's the oldest, boy in the middle, and then the youngest daughter.
Oh, yeah. And it's your son that's on the waterfront?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah. He works steady at Deltaport now.
Oh, okay.
Does a lot of training down there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you find that things changed in terms of, by the time that you had your kids, were you a member then and you had more steady work coming in and
Yeah.
it wasn't so much, it could be really tight one week and...
No, well, when we finally moved over here, we moved here in 1973. So I was a member a couple of years by then. And we'd moved to a different apartment, had our first child there. My daughter was 3 when we moved over here. So we were making pretty good money. And actually my wife did have a job over there, I guess you'd say. She looked after our little, I think it was a 10 or 12 apartment complex we lived in.
Yeah.
She was the manager for a few years there and saved our rent. We actually got rent free, and that was used to
great.
help our down payment on this house actually. So she was a big contributor from that point of view, big time.
So were you working on the waterfront, and were you maybe you were a business agent at the time when women started to work?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was. Can't recall now if I was a business agent or the president, but I actually signed registered one of the first gals that
Oh, yeah.
worked in New West.
Where did she work?
She worked, Surrey, Jock, or whatever. Yeah. She's actually working now at West Shore Terminals, I do believe.
Okay.
I remember her first name. Erica was her first name. I just can't remember her last name, but
Okay.
I remember registering her. She was one of the first gals we registered.
Yeah.
It was, a lot of people think we kept women away. Probably some guys did in a sense, but I can recall a lot of guys wanted to bring their wives or their daughters down to the waterfront for quite some time. They wanted to get them down there. But at this early start, I really don't think women could have survived when I started. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they could have. I know there was one in Vancouver that started quite before we ever registered one, and I guess she was a very very tough gal and a good worker.
Mhm.
But you've got
Just the physicality of the job, or
you got a lot of things going, one way or the other. They call it good or bad, but I mean, if you weren't physical, but you had to be mentally tough too.
Mhm.
Let's face it, it was a male-dominated job.
Mhm.
Still is, I guess, in some guys' opinions. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'll tell you quite personally, I wouldn't have wanted my daughter on the waterfront. I probably wouldn't want her on the waterfront right now.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion.
And when you say mentally tough, what do you mean?
Well, they're going to take a little flack. So,
Uh-huh.
whether they do today or not, I don't know. But
Right.
they would have in those days. I know that for a fact.
Right. So you were president. Roughly what time were you president?
I'll go back from 201 for about 6 years. So what is that? 6 or 7 years in that time frame, I guess.
Okay. So were there any kind of particularly high points or low points during your time as president?
Not really. I mean, I got enjoyment out of getting a contract signed. I got enjoyment out of things like I was there when Deltaport opened up
Okay.
and was part of, we had to do a lot of, not so much negotiations, but in a sense negotiations with the terminal operator, telling us how it was going to run, what kind of manning we're going to need, what kind of training we're going to need. So setting all that up was good.
Uh-huh. What were some of the what were some of the special things that you had to do to prepare for the opening of
basically,
TSI?
make sure we had the manning and make sure we could get the training done. And we always thought we could. But when they first came to us with, they had charts and numbers that we thought were totally out of proportion.
Mm.
We said, oh, we're not going to need that many people. And they kept saying, yes, we are. And we were wrong and they were right.
Oh, wow.
So it was getting the manpower ready, or getting our local to accept the fact that we're going to need all these people and need all the training.
Uh-huh.
And then get the people trained in the right fashion. Like a lot of guys wanted all types of training. Well, you couldn't have 4 different types of training. You were only going to start with one type at the start. So just getting that all settled down so the guys would understand what the job was like and what it was going to take to run it.
So what was some of the new training that you needed for the?
Well, we needed to train the rail-mounted gantries, checkers, the bomb carts. We had already, because we had gantries at Fraser Surrey dock before, but we still needed to train a lot more gantry drivers. So it was all those fields.
You
Reach
knew-
stackers. We never had reach stackers in our port,
Uh-huh.
so we had to get all that. And the training was totally different for checking. Checking at Surrey for steel products. We had some containers, but we just didn't have enough people or the system that they were going to use. We didn't have the knowledge of how to do that, so we had to train the people to be checkers for the containers. So.
And just to be clear, checkers in that way means data entry.
Yes.
Using
on
the computer
computers.
system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was a big part of that. That was a plus. That was nice. That was a good thing. A great thing for our local. It was a great thing for our local.
So when I just want to talk through this question of the manning that was expected. As much as you can recall, what did they ask for, and how did the union respond, and
Well, they would give you numbers like, say, on a certain shift, you're going to need 80 bomb carts. That's the guys that drive, the trucks around to pick up the cans off the ship or take them to the rail or back and forth. And we're going, oh, come on, there's no way you need that many. And you're going to need X number of checkers, maybe it'd be 20 checkers. And we knew how many gantries, 2 in each gantry. You need 5 gantries that night. We knew those numbers, and you're going to need this many reach stackers. And so they would come up with these types of numbers, and we were worried after we heard that, or knew that they needed those numbers, how we were going to supply them. So that was our big concern, is to get all those people trained in time, because we didn't have the equipment. We actually put some equipment on Fraser Surrey dock and got to use a little bit of it there prior, because when you're not, how do you train if you haven't got a piece of equipment to train with?
Yeah. Was there a concern that they were inflating the numbers?
No, we just thought they were not inflating, but just kind of putting something out there that we didn't know whether they were trying to almost intimidate us in a sense. Because there was, I got to tell you quite frankly, there was a factor in those days that didn't want us to be down there. They wanted it to be Vancouver.
Who wanted it to be Vancouver?
Well, the employer, the BCMEA, for one, and some people in Vancouver themselves.
Why do you think the BCMA wanted to keep it within Vancouver?
Because they had this feeling that this little old local over here couldn't handle it, and because it was not on the river, they thought we were river people, okay? That's the best way I can describe it. We weren't deep sea, we weren't, you know what I mean? So that's just how you got the feeling. So I had to do a lot of talking with those people. The BCMA put a lot of pressure on us. They were threatening to do certain things. I can't get into the specifics, but they were threatening to do certain things to us, and you know, amalgamation. A lot of crazy things are thrown at you. So it was a little dicey until we got it running.
Was it important to you guys that you get that Delta port and prove that you were able to handle it as 502? And
Yeah, that's where I had a few sleepless nights worrying about. You know, now you've got it, you know you're going to get it. You know, it's being built. Now can we do it?
Yeah.
Can we do a good job? Can we man it? So I sweated that out a little bit, yeah, for sure. But we had a lot of good people in the local, and a lot of the people I had under me, the business agents and whatnot, did a lot of good work to get our trainers put together. You know, to find the right people to train is one thing. We got some help from Vancouver, which we appreciated a lot, and they helped us out with some of that, and so it worked out. But it was a big task. Great for our local. I mean, right now, we have so many people working down there.
Yeah.
We're up into the 800s for members, and prior to that, we were in the 300s. So you can see the
So Deltaport had a huge influence then
yes.
on the size of the local. And
big
that kind of-
influence. Yes. But the river's always been our meat and bread, our bread and butter, if you want to say. You know, so it's very important. It always was to me, anyway. It still is, and it's hopeful that it still will stay solid at Fraser Surrey. But I'm a little concerned because they seem to be losing a lot of cargoes, and you've heard of this coal thing that they're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's not good. I've looked over across there yesterday and I see all these gantries sitting up in the air. They're not making money until they're down, so you know it doesn't look too good with that sitting there. But car ships are still looking good, I guess. We've had a lot of cars in this local. All your Asian vehicles come through one place, the river. That's where they come.
Do you think that's part of the identity of 502? Is that it's a river?
I think a lot.
Local?
Yeah, we were called river rats for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, proud of it usually.
Did you call yourself River Rats?
The baseball team used to. That was their name.
Tell us about the baseball team.
Well, just two guys joined softball. You know, they had it for a few years. I don't know. I don't think there's one anymore. But
Beer league or?
no, they played one of these leagues. I don't know what it was around the Surrey, New West area.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
not sure. I went and watched them a few times. But they had some good ball players. But for a time, they were the River Rats.
And was it all 502 guys that formed
No,
a
I
team
think
together?
I think they had some other guys, but basically it was 502. You know, whether it be members or casuals or whatever. So, yeah, I always was proud, you know, to be a river longshoreman. Always proud of it. Still am. So, hopefully, it stays solid for a lot of years to come.
When you retired,
Yeah.
The Fraser River Port Authority gave you that statue. Tell us about how you worked with the people in the Port Authority.
Well, we got to know them. When would that be? I'm trying to remember who was the president at the time. I think it was Don Garcia. Was our president, and that would be somewhere in the 80s, I guess. We never really got to know them up until that point. We decided, why don't we go talk to these people? You know, it's silly that we don't. We work, you know, they're a big part of our job, and we're a big part of their job, sort of thing. So Don set up these meetings anyway. We finally got to know the port, and I don't think he was the CEO at the time, but Rick Pierce became the CEO of the Fraser River Harbor Commission at some point down the road, and we got very close with him and did a lot of Asian trips, trips to Europe to promote our port. I went on 4 of them, I think it was. Three with the river and one with Vancouver. That was the time that Deltaport was coming on stream. But we did a lot of those missions to Asia and Europe to promote our port. And that was the time we were also trying to clean our image up, because we had an image of 2 things: too much drinking and safety. We were a very, very safety conscious port. So a lot of ships would come in and just cringe because we would be shutting them down. Their gear was no good. They said, "Oh, I just come from Seattle and we worked for 4 days and had no problems." I said, "Well, sorry, look at the shackle. It's damaged. You have to repair it." You know, ship would get quite upset with us, so threatened to not come in. But we worked with them. We were actually on one trip in Asia where I sat down with Rick Pierce, because we kept getting asking by shipping lines over there, why were we shutting ships down? Why were we so adamant on fixing the gear? And they couldn't quite understand. So we actually wrote out I don't know what you want to call it, but a list to inform them, this is what you expect when you come in. Have all this in good shape, and your chances are you're not going to have a problem. So we sat down one night over a couple of drinks, and we put this in place for them. We already had it in our local. I mean, we didn't need it, but he wanted to have something to. We're going to visit this ship owner tomorrow. We'll give it to him.
A guideline of sorts.
Sort of a guideline.
Like prepare.
Yep, be prepared. This is what we're really going to concentrate on. We don't just, not your ships, all ships. This is part of the gear that has to be in good shape. So we did things like that. We actually ran into in Australia a funny one, if I can tell you a quick story. Ed Carl, who was their kind of their promotions guy in those years, we went for a walk one day. Where we were staying wasn't far from the dock, so we walked down, and you could walk into the dock, no passes needed, and seen this ship and kind of recognized the name. And we asked the guys, "I think we can go on and look?" And yeah, sure. The Australian longshoreman guys, they go ahead. So we're up there BSing with guys and told them who we were, and so, "You want to come up and meet the captain?" That was a dumb move. Anyway, we go up and meet the captain, and you know, introduce ourselves, and he says, "Oh, that's interesting." He says, "A few weeks ago, I just came from New Westminster."
Oh, no.
We'd shut his ship down.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. So that was a pretty short visit.
Okay.
I wasn't too receptive
That's
after
funny.
that. But just silly things like that can happen.
So
Another one, we bumped into a ship owner in Hong Kong. No, Japan, excuse me. And got talking away, and he gets a knock on the door. A few minutes later, he comes back and he says, "Would you know why they shut my car ship down today? The ramp, a lot of car ships in the early days, the ramp that you drive off the cars on would be decayed, rusted out. So I guess this particular one was in bad shape, and they shut his car ship down." So another meeting that didn't go over too well. But that's how small the world is. That, you know, you just get a knock on the door, and you're there visiting, and his car ship is sitting now at Anna's Auto Terminal, not working.
Shut down.
and he's pretty upset
Right.
because of this.
Someone, the Jeff Clayton, the machinist who we interviewed, said that if a ship could work in New Westminster, it could work anywhere.
That's basically what we were proud, in a sense, that we did get ships in good working order. You know, like it or not, safety is pretty important.
And for the safety of wherever the ship's going thereafter, right? For
Yeah,
the guys
sure.
that are down in California. Or
I mean,
wherever.
if you've ever seen something break on a ship, it's pretty scary. And I've been down below when gear is broken, and it's very scary when you have the main line break on a load and cargo is bouncing everywhere. Nothing broke, but what happened on a job when me and my buddy were in Vancouver working, we're down below and we're taking out little tubing like this, but it was in boxes like this, and they were about 40 feet long, like the boxes. They were too long to take out of the hatch level, so you had to dip them like this, okay, on an angle. So they get about 3/4 of the way out of the hatch, and 2 of the ends of the boxes gave way. These things came down. It's like 1,000 pickup sticks coming at you.
Oh my God.
And we got behind a lift truck that was, we were right on the main deck. We were on the steel deck of the ship. We got behind this lift truck, and this stuff was bouncing off the walls behind us. And we just said, "I hope they don't ricochet into my back." And when that thing settled, there was these little pipes, little, bars everywhere. And it was just, we're just sweating there, We looked at each other. We didn't even have to say anything. We were up the ladder. Foreman says, where are you guys going? We're booking off. We're out of here. We've had enough of this. Because we'd been arguing with them earlier in the day about the way they were doing it. And we said,
Oh, wow.
we're out of here. So it can be a very scary job. And there's one instance where you're lucky to come out of there with no injuries.
Was that one of your closest shaves, or?
That was about the closest I think I ever come.
Yeah.
I had another one where we had a load of lumber come down, and it was bouncing around pretty good, but not quite as bad as this one.
Mm-hmm.
The lumber just broke free from the slings, and it was pretty
Very
hairy
scary.
that time. But yeah, there's some dangerous things go on. Even today, it's a dangerous. Well, it's still a real dangerous job with
Sure.
all the heavy equipment and heavy lifts that you have today.
So if New West was known as the safety port, the drinking port, the river rats, how was Vancouver known?
I don't really know. I mean, I knew a lot of guys from Vancouver, but they were a good port. They were a big port. I mean, I can honestly tell you right today, I used to bug them quite a bit in negotiations that they couldn't seem to get their crap together, I would call it. And we were small and tight, and we could, as a caucus, be tight, unified.
Mm-hmm.
Then I learned later on when we got bigger what they were going through. So I've actually apologized to a couple guys. Said, now I know what you guys went through. When you get bigger problems because you get people more that don't want to sort of. We were lucky in our local. We were very tight local in those days. I think today we're not quite as tight because you have more people. And the more people you have, the more diversity, the more opinions you're going to have. But we stuck together pretty good. When we went in as a caucus, we were solid.
Mm-hmm.
If there
Once
was,
you had worked it out amongst yourselves,
if there were
and
6
gone
of us,
forward.
that's where it was. One spokesman, but 6 guys on the same track. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how we were always tight.
Did you find that was a strong bargaining position to take? If
It
you
was
went
from
in
our point of
together
view.
and-
It was from our point of view. A lot of guys said no. It was somewhat, because you weren't speaking it as a unit. You didn't let it. We let everybody speak, but we all spoke the same way.
Right.
We knew what we wanted, and our local stayed together with it. So.
And I guess you worked that out amongst yourselves
Oh, yeah.
before you made, and
Yeah.
then once you made a decision, you would go forward
We stuck
with
with it,
the
yeah.
decision.
And then we'd
that you
have to change our. You always have to change in your negotiations, but you started with a game plan and you stuck to it until you had to change.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas others may have problems getting their plan together, if you want to call it that. So we were lucky to be a smaller local and a tight local.
When did the hall move to Surrey?
You had to ask me that.
And how was that?
It was finding the land, the place was very difficult because we had a lot of different people thinking different areas. We did negotiate with the Fraser River Harbour Commission to lease this land. Did we get it now for 25 years? I guess they're going to have to look at that lease pretty soon too. But we got a lease for that land for virtually nothing from the port. And it was difficult to find the location because we had to worry about transportation. Not everybody had a car. Bus service wasn't the greatest coming from, you got guys that lived in New West that could get to the hall there relatively easy, where over here it was going to be difficult. So we had to go through those problems. It was a difficult move, but we just had to. We had no parking over there, and our work was moving over here. I mean, we had nothing at the New West side hardly, so other than the car ships basically.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to find a new location.
And so when was that? When roughly?
Okay, I quit in 2001. Somewhere in the early 90s, I guess.
Okay.
Or yeah, somewhere in there maybe, yeah.
So before Delta Port, before the containers.
No, we were talking to them at our hall before, our old hall before we went down there. Yeah, remember that. Yeah. We'd had our first meetings at their old hall. Yeah. Would be before that.
So the containers opened in '97.
Yeah, I think it was 97.
But you were planning it with them from the early '90s.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay.
Was it 97 it opened?
Might have been '92.
I'd have to.
They started planning it from '92. Yeah, they started planning it from '92 and it opened in '97. And they did the first expansion by 2000.
And 97 rings a bell because at the same time we were negotiating the movement of the hall with them also because it involved traveling time and transportation. So all those things figured into it. Okay, they were telling us, okay, we don't want to pay too much travel. Where are you going to move to be cheaper for taxis and stuff like this? So it was in that transition period of them opening, and we're moving over there.
Right.
But it was tough because to find the land was very difficult at the time. And now you see what it's like now with the perimeter road going in. It's not looking such a good location.
Yeah.
Whether we have to look for another one or not, I don't know. That's going to be a decision the local's going to have to deal with at some point, I guess. It was a big process. My secretary at the time, he did a lot of work. He did all the planning of the building, and big project. He had a committee, but he did the brunt of the work.
Right.
He was a hard-working guy. He's not with us anymore, but he was a good one.
Yeah.
It was a very, very tough time. Like just organizing it all.
Yeah.
It was very tough.
And the old hiring hall, how was it to leave that one behind? Did they have a closing down ceremony, or was it sentimental kind of thing?
No, not that I recall. No,
Yeah.
It was time to move on.
Okay.
It was time to move on.
Yeah.
It was kind of sad in a sense because, when I started, you could walk right from the hiring hall right to PCT in 2 minutes. You can go to work right there. It was right across the street, virtually. Just walk 5 minutes. You're on the ship.
Yeah.
It was kind of nice. But we just had you didn't have room. Even inside, you didn't have enough room, and you had room to park about 10 or 12 cars. Everybody else to park on the street. The neighbors were getting mad. We had high rises coming up then. Too much noise at 6 in the morning when you'd arrive for dispatch, so we had to get out for more than one reason. Yeah. But it was a long-standing, tradition to go there. You put a lot of time in that old hall.
Yeah.
Dispatch is a big key of our local. It's something we've always cherished. Vancouver has a company dispatch where we have a union dispatch. So we've cherished that for a lot of years. And it's been threatened by the employer to want to take it away, want to amalgamate with the other locals and things like this. But we've been able to keep what we have, and it's something that we cherish. To be able to dispatch yourself is quite a good thing.
Did they try to renegotiate that during the process of opening up Deltaport?
Yes, we had many talks on that. As far as we said, we're going to need more payment from them because we have to have, dispatchers on call more and whatnot. So we got we get a stipend from them. I can't recall the number right now, but we get an amount of money per month from the BCMEA for dispatch, and we had to negotiate part of that. We had to negotiate what kind of transportation was going to be provided through them and the employer. So those things were ongoing for quite a long period of time. And that, as I said, they had the want to go to Vancouver if they could have, but we had the jurisdiction. So, but you know what? We didn't want to test our jurisdiction. Not saying that Vancouver would have pushed the issue, but if the employer would have pushed the issue, we didn't. From our point of view as officers, we didn't want to allow them to go to a court and say, okay, do they have jurisdiction? And
You didn't want to risk it.
no way. It was too important to us to want to go that route. But they would have liked to have gone that way if they could have.
Did you like the negotiations process, like when you were involved in that kind of thing?
I did
Was
to a
that-
point, yeah. I enjoyed the getting it part done. I didn't enjoy the hours of countlessly sitting there looking at walls. That wasn't too much fun. But the day,
When you achieved
looking somebody in the eye and getting something done was good. But
Yeah.
the waiting and that's not a fun process. It's very, very slow, tedious. You break off. We'll come back after lunch. You sit there and just look at the walls. You've already got your position, so there's nothing really to talk about. So you're wasting time. Just killing time. Okay, are they going to be back? And then you're waiting to see if they're going to be back. And they say we'll see you at 2. Well, 2 never comes. It's always 3:30 or 4. And then going till 3 in the morning ain't fun. I remember doing a couple times in Vancouver when we got in front of the labor minister. Bill Lewis was his name. Quite a character, real good guy. And we'd be in his offices trying to get something ratified, and all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. Buses aren't running, SkyTrain ain't running. How do you get home?
Mhm.
So
Oh no.
it was a lot of fun, but getting a contract and getting it ratified by your membership is very
Gratifying.
satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. The one that isn't is, I remember I took one bad when we thought we had a good deal, and the membership, no, they didn't like it.
Didn't take to it.
Didn't take to it at all. So that was a tough one.
What did they shoot you down over?
It could have. I can't recall, Peter. Basically it's usually money,
Yeah.
one way, shape, or form. And the one that was another one was tough. We always had an hour lunch on day shift, and one set of negotiations we agreed with the employer through a lot of in-house struggle with the locals, all the longshore locals, that we finally said, I guess it would be beneficial, but a lot of guys thought they were going to finish ship. See, what we gave them was a longer afternoon shift. So that put more money in our pockets, because you have now another half hour to work in the 24-hour clock, follow, because you took a half hour away of lunch. So our day shift then ended at 4:30, our afternoon started at 4:30 rather than 5:30. So it gave more money into our pockets, we felt, as negotiators. But our guys thought, well, now ships are going to finish earlier and we're going to lose. I mean, they came up with some of the wildest imaginative things to be negative over this, when the bottom line was they didn't want to lose their hour of lunchtime.
They wanted their hour lunch.
And for a lot of reasons. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Half
that's-
an hour is not a lot of time to
that's
get
right,
anything done.
To
is
get
it?
anything done. Exactly. So that might have been the year that they actually turned it down. I think it was, maybe.
Okay.
But it was over that plus money, but it's usually just money or length.
Yeah.
Like now they signed an 8-year contract. I don't think I'd have ever got away with that years ago.
Mm.
We did a 5-year, we almost got hung for it. So 8 years is a long time.
Yeah.
I took that one bad. When you get the results, you're sitting there waiting, and then the phone rings. Brian, they dumped it. Oh, that's lovely. That's just
no.
lovely. So now you're
And
back.
after you spent all those
Oh,
hours
yeah.
staring at the wall over
Yeah.
it, and
So now you're back into negotiations at some point. And of course now the employer, he's jumping that high. He's madder than hell, and it's not fun times.
So you obviously got to know some of the employers really well through the negotiation.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the characters on that side.
Well, they're just doing their job. I mean, a lot of guys didn't like them, or sure, they were hard men. I mean, I got to know I actually sat in the plane with him on one trip. The trip we went to Asia. Bob Wells was his name. And, very hard rock, but I thought he was pretty fair. But got to know a lot of them, and they had. When we had disputes, they would send out a guy from the BCMA. I got to know numerous ones of those guys, and they were good. They were all doing their job. I'm doing my job. They're doing their job. So you had to look at it that way. A lot of guys, well, he's an ass, blah blah blah. Well, sure, in your opinion, he is, but they're thinking the same about me. So it's a wash. I mean, they didn't like me because of whatever. So what's the difference? But you had to work with them. So
right.
why not try and work as good as you can with them? We had great arguments. Some doozies. But at the end of the day, you got the job done. You got the ship back working, and you meet them the next time and have a laugh. I got mad at it was snowing one day when I was a business agent years back, and we were still in New West. And guys called me up. They'd moved some guys from doing one job to put them on a front end loader to remove snow, and they never called us to do this. They're supposed to let us know and keep us in mind. Anyway, I phoned him up, and he said, you're full of crap, I'm doing what I want to do. And I says, no, you're not. You're going to stop that right now. I'm telling my guys to stop. He says, well, do what you want to do, and maybe I'll have them fired by the time you get here. So I'm steaming now. I know this guy for years. Ken Kavanaugh's his name. And so I get in my car, can't get over Patella Bridge. Snow, it's accident, Now I got to drive all the way to Port Mann, fighting the snow all the way, get to Fraser's Surrey, storming up. He has offices upstairs, storming up the stairs, knock on the door. Come on in. He says, what took you so long? Yeah, He says, oh, by the way, I agree with you. what do you do, eh?
Yeah.
You just have a laugh. You know,
Yeah,
so I'll buy you a beer someday, eat turkey, but just stuff like that. It's just funny stuff that'll go on. You know, that's why I love the job. It was, you never knew what you were going to hit.
Uh-huh.
Always different problems, always different things to deal with. So I enjoyed being a union rep. I wouldn't change it a bit.
Yeah.
Like Joe, he tried to talk me into, even after I didn't run anymore. Come on down to the coal terminal. I said, no, Joe, I just can't go down there. Because, you know, the pension is a lot. You get some pretty good pension down there compared to our pension, but I chose not to do it. I'm glad I didn't. I just didn't want to do it.
When conflicts came up, did guys find it easy to sort of move past things quickly and just laugh about it the next
Some
day?
guys could, some guys couldn't. You know, I mean, I made a lot of enemies over the years, of course, but I think I can still have a drink with those guys. You know, I mean, I made mistakes. They made mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I've admitted to guys, you know, made a mistake. Yeah, you were right. I was wrong, but can't do anything about it now. But yeah, I think over the years you get over it.
Yeah.
Some guys may not. I've gotten over any issues I ever had. But you just got to deal with men. I thought that you deal with them how you expect to be dealt by yourself. That's how I always tried to look at it. And I told guys after I had a lot of experience in there that I'd get a new business agent. I'd say, well, you know, remember a couple of things. One is that you know what your so-called enemies may do to you, but you don't know what your friends are going to do to you. And what I was trying to tell them is, don't get too close to the guys that you're friendly with, because they're the guys you're going to have more problems with. They're going to want favors. You follow? And so I said, just beware of that. You got to be very careful with that. I was usually right. That they would come up to me someday and like, he said, that son of a bitch. You know what he wanted me to do, you know? And I'm going, yeah, but what did I tell you? You know, this is what people do to you.
Yeah.
They figure you're your friend. They're going to want a little gimmick or a little something off you.
So were you must have been a business agent during the '86 strike and then the commission that came after that?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that strike and what did you think of the commission and what happened with the container clause?
It was more, I think, from my thought process was how we dealt with it as a union was more important and how we got told by the commission that this was going to be the rules, because we had a vote. I think maybe Joe or somebody told you that we had a vote on how to do. He came up and said this is what's going to happen. You're going to get $10 a container for the container clause, and how we had to look after it from that point of view. I thought was very important. I think after you look back at it a few years later, it probably wasn't a bad thing that happened, because the container clause gave us a lot of grief. It really did. It was always a contentious issue. You were trying to chase down containers. Vancouver had the bigger headache because they had 99% of the containers at the time. So they were always, where's that container going? Is it in the 50-mile radius? Is it not? And so there was a lot of headaches. We had
You would have had those headaches as the business agent.
Yes, I had some of them. But we also had some extra work because we de-stuffed or stuffed containers where we don't do that now, but we did some of that work. So we had some extra manning, but when you take a look at it now, what we have compared to that, I think we did pretty good. And the money that comes in from the container clause is well appreciated in the pension. So it was a contentious issue, and I think the biggest problems I saw was actually how the union handled it in negotiations in themselves, in their own caucus. Because a lot of guys wanted to fire guys. You know, it was pretty heated. It was pretty heated discussions on the whole issue about how we're going to do it, why we even got into talks about it, why we shouldn't get into talks. And then we knew eventually someone was going to take it away anyway. Back to work by the government numerous times. So it wasn't something that we weren't aware of.
It wasn't unexpected.
I knew it might, not exactly how it came down, but you always had in the back of your head something like that could happen. Could happen to you. So.
Because it was always contentious for the employers?
Yes, very contentious.
Yeah.
And from our point of view too, we thought we lost work. If a can slipped out of our, went where it shouldn't go, and we'd lost the de-stuffing or stuffing of it, so we were upset, and guys spent a lot of time chasing cans, and Like I said, we didn't do that as much as Vancouver had to do at the time.
When 502 had to do that, was that because was there destuffing at Surrey Fraser?
Yeah, we did some there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we'd do some stuffing. We did a lot of lumber. We did lumber. We did oh Christ, what was it? We did unstuffing, say, boxes of salmon. I can't just remember all the different. We had some there, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did a lot of stuffing of lumber into cans for quite a while. Had a regular crew of jamming in packs of lumber into containers.
Down at Fraser Surrey?
And we did some pulp, I do believe. Some pulp and paper. I don't remember what else. But yeah, we did some stuffing down there.
Mm-hmm.
Probably even did some after, because sometimes it would be a convenient place to do it too, because you had facilities there to do some of that work after the container clause even.
Mm-hmm.
So you just because it was easier for, say, a guy needed this amount of newsprint or something, and it came in by rail, he didn't have a facility to do it, he would do it at our facility.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a fair amount of that work now, but I don't think we do any of it now as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
And I heard in those days there was some container barges coming up from Tacoma.
Yes.
Did you ever work any of those?
I don't think I worked them, but I had a lot of input into them as a business agent, because we always had manning problems with them. They would only want to man it with this many guys, and there's no manning in the collective agreement on deals like that. Okay, there just isn't. So there was issues on that. But
so
I'm trying to. Was it Foss? I'm trying to remember the name of that outfit.
Foss, that sounds like it could be, because that's
Yeah.
that's a big barge.
Yeah,
crowd
I think it
down.
was Foss that brought some of them barges in.
So what kind of manning did they want?
Well, it would just be, we'd say we would need 4 guys, and they'd say we'd need 2. You know, it's just because you got to lay lumber down, you got to do the stackers and things like this. And an employer always, if we say 2, he wants 1. It's always, it's always going to be until you can settle it. I mean, it's
Why did they never put that in the collective agreement?
just because you never think that's the type of job will come up, I guess. And there was lots of things that would come up. I mean, you'd have incidents where, say, damaged cargo. We have damaged cargo in the collective agreement, but it doesn't tell you how many men to use. So you go to a job where it was a big mess. The ship had hit rough seas. There's cargo all over the place. Well, somebody's got to clean it up, and if we can do it safely, we'll do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he'd say, "Well, we'll just put a couple of guys down there." Come on, put a couple of guys down there. Are you crazy? It's just that's how you work things out.
Yeah.
And he always went low, and we always went high. I mean, that's just how you do it. So you just work them out. I mean, and then you'd have silly ones. I can remember a deal where our guys called me up. We haven't got enough men on this job. So I go over there. They were unloading some cans with hooks. Didn't have the heads, just we were using cargo hooks, 4 hooks on the end of a bar with a crane unloading these. Anyway, they had 3 guys. They probably could have got away with 2, but they wanted another guy. I'm going, well, what's the other guy going to do? He says, well, if we get another guy, then 2 of us can work 2 hours, and 2 guys can go home for 2 hours. So that's the silly crap you run into,
Okay.
Need 1 more guy to play cards, or pick a subject. You can find one it'll be there.
Okay.
It's just stuff that happens like that. I mean, some is more, of course, serious, but you can just find oddities like that happened all the time on the job, all the time. But all in all, it was a great run for me. I loved it. Great job. I think today it's still a great job. It's a great place to work.
Mm-hmm.